If you really shove it, it's fine. Right. Camera happy?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Hello, my name's Daisy. We're from the Bournemouth Film School. And I was hoping that just to start off with, if you could introduce yourself, say a little bit what you do and how you got into it.
Shall I kick off?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, in this context, my name's Fiona Shaw. I'm a novelist, and I'm the author of Tell It to the Bees, which has been adapted by Daisy and her team.
I'm Daisy Allsop, and I'm a producer, independent film producer. I've worked in film for a long time before going over to produce independently.
So I guess starting with Daisy, I was wondering what it was about Tell It to the Bees that attracted you and made you want to dramatise it into a film.
Well, Annabelle Jankel, who is the director, she had actually already optioned the book. So I knew Annabelle because we worked together on a film called Skellig a long time ago. And she had told me at the time when she was optioning the book, and she actually, over the years, kind of slowly, kept mentioning it to me and suggesting that I come on board. At the time, before I was even a kind of fully fledged producer, she's insistent that we would get there together. So I read the book, I thought, but long before I worked on it with her, I read the book, I thought it was beautiful. I was very drawn to just the love story. I love a love story. And these characters that were, ahead of their time. And I was just very encouraging with her about it and helping her to shepherd it and giving her, we had a lot of long discussions about development. And then it just became apparent that we ought to work on it together.
And then I guess, Fiona, for you in terms of finding a team to adapt something that you've written, that you've obviously, poured your heart into a little bit, and then had to let go, is there like certain things that you were looking for?
Annabelle approached me, or rather, Annabelle approached my agent. So it didn't happen. It happened the other way around, if you like. So the first I heard was an email from my agent saying, "There's a director who's interested in optioning your book, and would like to meet you and have a conversation about it." So that was the first point at which I heard from Annabelle at all what her take on the novel was, what she was interested in. So we met and had lunch, and a long lunch, and discussed at that very early stage what her kind of vision for it was, which I think remained fairly consistent over the years it took to make the film happen. And she wanted to find out from me a bit more about what I thought about different characters, but in a sense, not so much to make this very central two characters, but some of the other characters who are a kind of important supporting cast. What had led me to write them in the way I had. So that kind of discussion, it was a really enjoyable conversation, actually, as it is for an author about the book you've written, somebody who's really engaged with it. So that's how it came about.
Yeah. And then in terms of like kind of book to film adaptations, there's a lot of kind of controversy a lot of the time about like, well, what is a good book to film adaptation, that sort of thing. For you, what do you think is the element to focus on when there are adaptations? Because obviously film is such a different medium. Are there particular elements like character or tone or something like that you think are important to focus on?
I've worked on a few book to film adaptations over the years. In my former guise as a head of development, associate producer, I worked on a film called Skellig, 5 Children and It, which was my favourite book as a child. Was very closely involved in the development of that. A book called The Song of Names. So it's something I've done a lot, and I always approached it really kind of, it's a difficult thing to put your finger on, but it's the essence. It's the tone and the essence and the heart of the book, which might be a character, it might be a feeling, it might be a sort of a message. But I mean, in all cases, you have to make changes to dramatise. If you just presented the book straight, what works on the page isn't always right for the film, and it's just there's the simple rules of filmmaking: show not tell, and but I think it's about firstly in all cases, and I hope Fiona feels in this case, I think a relationship with the novelist is really important, and getting to know them involving them in the process and letting them to read. And, you know, I think if you get to the point where you've taken the book away from something that the novelist likes or appreciates, then you've done the wrong thing. You know, I think it's about whether they feel you've kept to the heart of it. I mean, you tell me. It's much more.
Yeah, well, it's never happened to me before, so and it will probably never happen again. No, I agree, and there are plenty of stories out there. You don't have to hunt very hard on the internet to find stories of novelists who are very unhappy with adaptations that have been made of their books. Yes, I think it's probably. I knew that it would. I knew that if there was a film, if the film happened, it was going to be very different from the book. I mean, not least because you can't sit in front of a 9-hour film, which is about how long it takes to read a book of that length. And I knew that the filmmakers, as creatives themselves, were going to make their own decisions about what they wanted to emphasise, privilege, draw out that would very possibly be different from what I'd got in the novel. And I did decide early on that I would make my peace with that. It seemed to me that as a novelist, I mean, pragmatically speaking, if the film got made, it could only be a good thing for my book. Yeah. So, you know, in a kind of, even if it was a very, very different film.
If it's a to-the-letter film, why bother reading the book? You know, there's two different
that's also true. Also true.
The stories have lived in two different ways, and so you almost have to read it and watch it to see the different.
That's sort of interesting, because you could say then there's different kinds of adaptation that we've probably all seen in film, where there's some that are kind of, as it were, a creative adaptation, and one that's a very faithful adaptation. And I suppose it would be an argument as to which of those, whether one works better than the other, or what makes one work better than the other. Yeah,
absolutely. But I think often, you know, when there is a book, you know, all our actors read the book, and when there is a book behind the screenplay, even though there's a lot obviously that's not in there, I think it gives a texture and a depth, and it informs everybody that's involved. You know, from the production designer read the book, you know, everybody who's doing something creative went back to it to just give it a bit of depth to their own understanding of the characters all the time, or of the house, or whatever it may be. And then maybe doesn't do it exactly like is written on the page, but it just gives a springboard, and I think you always feel that it's always going to add a texture.
So how did it kind of work with how much were you consulted, and what was the kind of process of working together? Because like you say, like there are some films in which the writers kind of, the option gets handed out and then that's kind of where it ends. How did it work on this?
Okay. I don't know. We had a few conversations along the way. I mean, Annabelle did with you before I started, but I think we sent you every draft.
I think you did send me every draft, and there was an early script, which I remember at one point reading.
Yeah.
Some of which I loved and
your
some which I
notes
didn't.
were always very good. They were always it was kind of respectful of the process. And we always listened to everything you had to say, because you weren't saying, that's not how I wrote it.
No,
You know, it was much more, understanding what our process was, and then feeding into that, and often just giving great notes that weren't even anything to do with your book. But I mean, there were certain things that were very rightly very important to you. That, for example, the lake scene. You know, I think which had always been a kind of very important emotional moment, and I think, you know, what is important that lived into the film and was treated.
There's a scene which I won't say because you should come and watch the film.
Watching it.
You are watching the film. There's a scene by the lake, and actually, of course, bits of it have been seen extensively on the internet, which isn't as I wrote. Isn't a scene that I wrote. But crucially, there's a very important, to me, scene by a lake with those same three characters. So I suppose it's a good example of the filmmakers taking the kind of core, emotional core of my scene and doing something very different, doing something quite different with it in your working.
The bees as well is something that we took from the book, but
you ran with the bees.
we ran with it.
You flew with the bees.
Yes, at some point deep in VFX, I was thinking, why did we decide to do this? But you know, we thought Annabelle's a very visual filmmaker. She comes from an animation background, and we had this wonderful kind of texture of the bees, which felt like it could be there in the background of the film, but it kept coming back to us, and it felt like if it was gonna, it just felt right for the character of Charlie. You haven't seen the film again, so no spoilers, but it becomes part of the fabric of the plot, which is was something that was Annabelle's vision for how we developed it, and I think. And actually, then it becomes, so it is a different piece of work. It's taken from the book, and so but when we were on set with thousands of live bees.
Yeah, I can imagine that being
in those wonderful development meetings, we didn't actually think, how are we going to do this?
I came up to the set probably 5 or 6 times, just made visits, which was just completely fascinating and enjoyable, and was made very much welcomed, which was lovely. And one of the visits, as it happened, that was the first day that you had the bee cinematographer on his own set with his bee whisperer. And he would only film bees if he could bring his bee whisperer with him, who was
the Hop. His name was
the Hop. That's right. And he wore corduroy trousers, and he carried a very soft brush, so that he could brush the bees off things without
things like that.
And then looking at the setup with that the camera with this extraordinary lens, which is a medical lens, and then the mechanics of how you get live bees on a super on the frame in such a way that you can film them without the bees heading straight for the light and killing themselves. Because that's what bees do. They go for the light, so they have a big mirror, and they refract the light, the film light, onto the mirror, so that the bees don't go. They go for the mirror, not the. Yeah, it was amazing, and everyone's in complete bee suits, full stuff.
Space movie.
Yeah, except for the cinematographer, who's a cool, hard guy and doesn't wear anything, pretty much. Yeah. I mean, he was just. That was amazing watching that.
So we had that going on over in a sort of different part near the house that we were filming, and then there were 2 days when the 2 units met, and we had our real actors working with bees. So when Anna Paquin's doing this beekeeping scene with young Charlie, they're both sewn into their vintage bee suits, so no bee could get in. Yes. And they had a lesson the day before in beekeeping. Anna was terrified of bees, but.
She does a pretty fine job.
Yeah, she did. She did a great job.
That sounds amazing to produce, to organise all of that, and I don't know. I would have loved to see the risk assessment.
Well, my co-producer Nick led the way with the bees and the bee units. Thank goodness.
But you can't have imagined when you had the first conversation about let's give the bees a bigger part.
No,
you wouldn't have imagined where it would have taken you.
Exactly.
I'm guessing.
Where were you filming?
In Scotland.
Ooh.
So set it across one summer, which is different from the book, because the book goes over a long period of time.
About a year.
It's a year, I think. Yeah. Which then you've got the changing seasons, which you can't do obviously in film. So we had always had in mind that it would be over this hot summer, but then we shot in Scotland, and of course that's not how it goes.
If you shoot anywhere in England, it's not going to be a hot summer.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I was also going to ask, because there's quite a lot of female-led figures in the whole film, both behind the camera and in front of it. Do you think, at the moment, I mean, obviously we've seen a rise of the desire to have female filmmakers and all of that stuff, but have you, being in the industry, felt a change? And I'm sure the literary industry has that to some degree as well. Is it something that you felt has changed recently?
I think this is much more for you, Daisy.
Film business. It absolutely is a conversation, very much in forefront and ongoing. The BFI, who put a chunk of the funding into our film, have got fantastic quotas. Every film has to meet in terms of diversity across the board. You have to tick lots of these boxes. It's obviously something we set out to do anyway. We wanted to be very female driven, but one barrier we came up against is that we obviously already had female producer. We had one male producer, but apart from that, female producers, female writer, actually more than one male, female screenwriters, director, and we wanted to just roll that out through the crew. The reality when it comes to actually crewing up, and part of our financing was coming from Screen Scotland, and we're shooting Scotland, you have to spend a certain amount there, and also it's just not practical to have to bring a lot of people up and accommodate them. So we had to hire locally as well. So trying to hire diverse but local, it is, and in among there were 6 other films happening in Scotland at the same time as us. A lot of them were much bigger budget. It was a big Netflix movie, and so it's not like you have this enormous pool and you can, you know, interview everyone and get, you know, wonderful diverse crew. You know, you sometimes you just have to get the people who are good, who are local. So, but you know, I think we did a good job across the board, and it's slowly changing. But you know, it has to change at the grassroots level. It's got to change at the training level, because then people come up through the ranks, and there are enough. What are the conversations in the literary world about it?
I think the conversation is definitely about diversity, but it'd be much more about BAME support within publishing and also for writers, and that seems really vital. And there's some great stuff happening, but it's good, but it's small, but it's definitely there, and it's getting a lot more press and support and coverage than it would have done even 5 or 10 years ago.
Again, that was difficult.
So I think, in publishing, women have always had quite a big role in publishing. In the publishing side of the publishing industry, there's been quite a lot of women, more women probably at a higher level than in the film business until recently. And I mean, obviously, back in my early days publishing, or as a student, certainly Virago, when it was founded expressly to say, what about all these women who, if they were men, would still be in print and have all been lost and forgotten? And what about commissioning and publishing young female writers?
Right.
So that was going on in the kind of 80s, and I think that really changed over time. That Virago and other initiatives changed the publishing landscape for women writers, which isn't to say that women are paid the same as men yet or anything else, but it has shifted. But it has taken, but most of my writing life, I'd say, for that to happen.
There's a group of people who've just lobbied for this year in Cannes. There to be a creche for the first time. First time.
God.
So that female acquisitions executives, sales executives, whoever can come to Cannes and bring their children and make that possible.
Yeah, and actually, sorry, go on.
Yeah, well then there's this organisation Raising Films as well, which is lobbying for more support for childcare on sets.
I was just going to say, actually talking to, it was the wardrobe people on Tell It to the Bees on set, and the people doing props or whatever, what I call them.
Masters.
Yes, whatever then rolls up. The women there were talking. They were talking about. I was asking them about what it's like to do their jobs and in working up in Scotland, and they're Scottish, working up in Scotland, and they said, well, we love the work, but sometimes the practicalities of long shoots when you've got primary school age children at home, you have to leave the house at 5:30 to get to the shoot, and you get back after they've gone to bed, but you also have to work out the logistics of it. If if your partner's also going out to work, and all that, they said it makes it nearly impossible as a parent. So,
although I think exactly. As a parent, I think as part of the emancipation of women, the conversation needs to be about male crew members and how difficult it is for men who are parents of young children to go to work long hours. Because it's
but there's also like an expectation that it should be the mother that sorts out the stuff as well, which is part of the problem.
Yes.
But I mean, that was fascinating. I'm done with my questions. So thank you very much.